biggest Aussie super fund, AusSuper's Paul Schroeder, told an economic conference in Sydney this week that Australia's tax system is stupid and a massive disincentive to companies and business. If you run a national business in Australia at the moment, you have about 100 different taxes that you've got to pay. How stupid is that? So why don't we fix that, he said. Yeah, good question. Mr. Schroeder was responding to questions about why his super fund, like many others, invests so much in overseas companies. He said they have to get a return for their Aussie investors, and so they look for the best companies, not countries, to invest in. 70 cents in every dollar that AusSuper gets has to be invested overseas. But AusSuper has 90 billion invested in Australia, so that's a fairly big chunk. The sad reality is that we just aren't productive enough here. And a lot of that is because of the ridiculously high level of government we have. Too many rules and regulations. And as Mr. Schroeder said, 100 different taxes that you've got to pay if you run a national business in this country. It's a disgusting and immoral waste of our money by government overlords. It's something that our special guest this week has pointed out on his TikTok and X and Insta platforms under the handle Shallow Chow. You may know him from there. CEO and founder of the QHI National Building Company, Scott Challen. Scott, good to have you on the show. What is your take on those comments from the head of AusSuper about the fact you've got to pay 100 taxes if you've got a national business? Is he overstating it a bit, or do you feel that way sometimes?
Look, it feels like there's a million taxes sometimes. When I look at the bills list every week in our companies, all I see is money going to government at three levels: state, federal, state, local, and federal. It's a consistent grind. It's really hard to do business in Australia with multi-layered bureaucracy. They've all got their fingers in the pie, and they're all trying to take more of it off you. It's constant.
We were talking about an article by Robert Gottliebsen in the last segment about how 40% of the cost of a house
up to 48 in New South Wales.
Oh my God, it's just insane. It's basically red tapes, money that the government's ripping off average Aussies. All these layers of government with all these crazy taxes and red tape, green tape, rainbow tape, whatever. You've also got the banks. We talked about the difficulty with the banks and the fact that they're, getting a fair deal and nobody else is necessarily winning out from all of that. So everybody in the industry is getting kind of screwed over. The labourers and the building businesses are going bust and stuff. And, these taxes, 40 to 48%, a lot of that is coming from councils and their ridiculous rules. Robert Gottliebsen saying we need strong state government leadership to get these councils into line and make them accountable to a centralised state minister. That's one of the things he reckons could help. That was done in Victoria a few years back. What do you see as the fix for all this nut job red tape?
I don't think there's any one simple fix, because I believe that these layers have been baked into this multi-leveled system over many generations now. These safety nets that we've built, and when you question regulation or you question compliance, you get accused of wanting to cut corners and wanting to be dodgy. It's just not the case. The point is, though, that we've built so much into this bureaucracy now that it's become restrictive. We can't move. We can't pivot. We can't put more people on quickly. We can't get rid of people if we need to. Businesses don't have the flexibility, and they're not nimble enough to be able to work in this economy. AusSuper have made a really good point there, that Australia's a hard place to do business because of all that, that taxation and
compliance. I don't know about you, but I've got plenty of friends our age who should be and would be normally, if it was any other generation, would be hiring 10 or 20 young people.
Yep.
And they've packed up and gone to the beach.
Yep.
Because they can't handle the labour laws, and they don't want to bother. It's just there's no reward.
And then throw payroll tax on top of that as well. My business, 2022, we tripped into the payroll tax threshold, first time ever. Payroll tax in Queensland hasn't been indexed since 2018. It's the same rate now, 1.3 million, that it was in 2018. And look how much more we're paying people, from then to now. So there's all these little tripwires, all these little hazards that can catch you out. We made the mistake. It was just an admin error of being 3 days late paying our superannuation bill. We copped a $27,000 fine for that. We're a small to medium enterprise, and it was a simple admin error. It wasn't like we were trying to get out of paying super. 3 days late, bang, 27 grand, bang.
Yeah. And they make the rules up as they go along all the time.
That's what it feels like. And this is one of the main problems we have as small business, is keeping up with the rules. Now, why do I have to have a HR consultant within a company that employs, 10 to 20 people? I've got to have someone basically on retainer to help me manage the employees that that I have because the complexity of industrial relations and employment laws are so difficult now that I can't manage that kind of stuff. It's impossible.
We've got this culture too where people just kind of go, oh, it's a safety issue. Government's keeping us safe. Government's good.
Yep.
Government's holy.
Yep.
Government's like some charity organisation. We've got to stop you evil business people, bastards ripping off workers. You've got to stop you ripping off punters and the people doing the ripping off are the bloody government. 48% of your cost of your house is going to the pockets of bloody bureaucrats. And we're sitting around attacking the small business people who are trying to get out there and have a go. Why would you bother?
Well, look, you borrow $1 million to build that home, right? $1 million, 48% of that is going in government taxes and charges at 3 levels of government. So that's half of it gone. Where are you getting the money from? You're borrowing it from the bank. You're repaying the mortgage on that $1 million, half of it being fees, taxes and charges over a 30-year mortgage. I mean, get your head around that.
That's insane.
Who's making money here? The government and the banks.
And the banks. And yeah, look, it is just complete nuts. And I think what people have got to wake up to, and we've all got to start to realise, and I try to keep reminding myself, every time someone turns around and says, oh, we're going to screw that business guy, we're going to make sure that they're paying this or they're paying that, who ends up paying? The customer.
Yep.
Right? So it's not necessarily going to help the whole thing.
Well, this is why we have a non-productive economy, and we don't have any diversification within the market sectors that we have here now. With what we do, we're District 9 of the Hunger Games, mate. We are literally
God help us.
We're farming and digging stuff out of the ground, and we don't manufacture anything anymore. All we can do is build houses here, and that's becoming harder and harder as well. I mean, the idea that we're going to manufacture solar panels or any of this green energy tech in Australia, it's ridiculous. It's not going to happen. We don't have cheap energy. We have really difficult industrial relations laws. And like I said, as a small to medium enterprise, why do I have to have a HR company on retainer just to manage the number of employees that I have? It's nuts.
Yeah. One of my favourite online channels for really good reporting is TLDR. I think it's good to turn to an outside perspective outside of Australia for a summary on how Australia's going. They're a European outfit. And the reality is that we are in a recession in real terms by the metric that counts the most, which is GDP per capita. Yep. That's how much our economy grows per person, not the overall GDP, because that's cheating. You just bump that up with immigration, right? But when you break it down per capita, per head, you see that we actually are in a recession. Here's how TLDR explained that one.
While aggregate GDP has been growing steadily since late 2020, save for the third quarter of 2021, this is mainly a consequence of large amounts of immigration. And GDP per capita actually fell for 6 consecutive quarters between Q2 of 2023 and Q3 of 2024. While GDP per capita did apparently grow by 0.1% in the last quarter of 2024, according to the latest data, this was largely driven by a rise in exports as a consequence of what's known as front-loading, i.e. American companies importing as much stuff from Australia as they could before Trump's tariffs came into force. On top of this, quite a lot of this has been driven by a marked increase in government spending, which has risen from 21% of GDP in 2015 to a high of 28% last year. Without this increase in government spending, the country would have fallen into recession last year. The government has even burnt through its windfall and now expects to run budget deficits for the foreseeable future. While there's no chance of an acute debt crisis, after all, Australia's debt-to-GDP ratio stands at just 50%, earlier this year, one of the big credit rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, said it was considering downgrading Australia's AAA credit rating, citing a lack of fiscal responsibility and unsustainable tax and spend promises made by both parties during the election campaign.
Yeah, it's a pretty grim bloody picture, isn't it? It's and it's all government propped up. The fact that we even got out that little bit of a blip there in the last quarter of last year. First quarter of this year, though, we're back down again.
That's horrific.
So we are in a serious recession, I reckon. And
well, it's long overdue. We've kicked the can down the road for long enough now. There's a correction that's required. But, look, no government wants to be a part of that correction process. And that's political suicide, right?
Let's just talk quickly about your apprenticeship stuff. I noticed you did a clip on that recently too, and we've got this apprenticeship scheme that came out of the Future Made in Australia plan of $10,000 for young apprentices to train in residential housing industry. Yeah. It's a bit of throwing a Band-Aid at the problem.
Yeah.
But you had an interesting story too about a young fellow whose mum asked you to hire him as an apprentice.
Yeah, I mean, look, I get people reaching out to me all the time, saying would I be interested in putting an apprentice on, especially kids these days aren't that great with their social skills. Their parents reach out, and I don't have a problem with that. Look, good lady I know, really good friend, her son, had done the license, had done the hours, the learner's permit, the hours, the lessons, all the rest of it.
For his driver's license.
For his driver's license, failed his driver's license 3 times, and couldn't. And as a consequence of not having a driver's license, couldn't get an apprenticeship with a company like mine, purely because we need them to be able to drive around southeast Queensland. From Brisbane, we need them to be able to go 100 kilometres in any direction. So he was struggling to find an apprenticeship because he couldn't get a driver's license. Now, what's this barrier that we've built for these kids to try and get into the job market? Well, it's getting a license. Now, I'm in my early 50s. I know I don't look like it, but being in my early 50s...
Marvellous, mate. Marvellous.
Being in my early 50s, I walked into transport at the age of 17 on my 17th birthday, did my driver's test and walked out with my license that afternoon. I hadn't had any formal lessons and I was ready for the workforce. That's what we came from. We had a society where kids could step into the workforce and get a driver's license really easy.
There was also the police station at Stratty if
there
you were
was.
really desperate.
100%. Yeah, and I'm the first to admit that I went to a country police station, the local copper, and he took me around the block and I got my license. We're driving cars that have never been better, never been safer, but we've created even bigger roadblocks for kids to be able to get a driver's license. So this is a really simple one for me.
But it's another example of how the keeping you safe economy.
Yep.
Yeah, we're keeping you safe. We're keeping all this regulation and red tape is well-intentioned, I guess, but it's just creating a nation of people who are just, totally dependent on government.
Well, on the flip side of that, I had this other young kid working for me. He was in an admin role in my office, right? Now, he was on a temporary visa from India while he was studying over here. And he was driving around southeast Queensland on his Indian license, which he's legally allowed to do. He bribed a copper in Mumbai $5 to get that license. It was a 20-year license, so it had a 20-year date on it. And he's legally allowed to drive on that in southeast Queensland. So straight over here, studying at uni, working for us, driving around, and he was doing food deliveries in after hours. Now, contrast that with the kid who was born here, trying to get a license and get into the workforce, really hitting those obstacles. And to me, it was, these two different worlds and these two different setups that we have. Who are we helping here? Are we helping our own citizens? What safety is that if we're allowing this to happen, but we can't let our own kids get a driver's license to get an apprenticeship? So I know there's a lot, and since I did that story, there's a lot of people that reached out to me going, this is exactly what's happening to me. Or I'm 22, it took me to this long to get my license. It took this long to get the hours up. My family didn't have a car. We couldn't afford the lessons. And if you broke it down, I've got 4 daughters and 3 of them got driver's licenses now. We paid for as many lessons as
You got 4 daughters?
I do.
Sorry, I got 2,
yeah.
so I'm feeling your pain.
Oh, actually,
Love them. They're adorable.
Yeah, no carpenters in that lot, I might add. Probably a good thing. But having put 3 of them through driving lessons now and getting them to that point and, getting on the road, I've seen the pressure that they've gone through and the failed tests and all the rest of it.
Oh, yeah.
Now, fortunately, we could afford to pay for lessons as well, which helped a lot. But, I grew up in a single mum family. My mum had no money for stuff like that.
No.
There was she didn't even have a car herself. So where else would you have got lessons? I know there's some aid programs out there to help disadvantaged kids. Which
Everything
is great.
has a cost. This is the thing. Yep. All these government things have unintended consequences and unintended costs. And I bet you any money there's nobody sitting around a boardroom table in a government executive suite going, we need to consider all the unintended consequences of this policy before we bring it in. What would be some of the unintended consequences, folks? Let's workshop that. Nobody's doing that.
That's what we do in business, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
We game out the scenario.
Right, because if we don't, we go broke. But
Yep.
in government, they don't care. They're not accountable too much. They're accountable once every 4 years. Mate, we've got to take a break. Want to come back. There's another CEO that's very popular out there a lot these days is Matt Barry, the founder of freelancer.com.
Big fan.
And he's been saying some really interesting things. And I want to show a few clips and get your thoughts on that. So we'll come back in a moment. More with Shallow Chow on the other side. I want to tell you about a fantastic initiative that's happening out of Canberra right now. It's called the Awards for Men in Leadership. The awards are given out on International Men's Day, which is November 19. They're designed to combat the increasing denigration of masculinity in our culture and the widespread discrimination against males inside and outside the workplace. The goal is to lift the well-being of boys and men and facilitate healthy collaboration between men and women. The awards for men in leadership are designed to inspire men to make a bigger contribution to family and community and to elevate positive male role models. There's a $10,000 scholarship for studies and professional development, public recognition for the winners, and a year of mentorship and executive coaching for each recipient. It's targeted at young men and middle-aged guys who fought their way up from some other kind of disadvantage. This is the third year of the awards and it'll be the biggest yet. To find out more, just search up the Awards for Men in Leadership on Facebook. That was a segment clip from our weekly Friday night news show, The Other Side, which you can watch in full by simply going to YouTube and searching up The Other Side Australia. Then you'll find our full shows playlist. You can also find all of our full shows and our segments on our own website, othersidetv.com.au. That's othersidetv.com.au. Help us build a whole new Aussie media by joining us over there and signing up for the exclusive side.